So, this is something I never thought I'd put out there, but I guess I just need to tell someone, even if it's just the internet. Maybe someone can relate, or maybe it'll just help me get some closure. Anyway, here goes. I turned 18 in January of my senior year. I was always one of the older kids in my grade, and I didn't really think much of it when my birthday came around. I was just trying to get through the school year, finish my classes, and figure out what was next. College wasn't really on my radar. My grades were okay, but nothing to write home about. I didn't have any big plans for the future, I was just kind of coasting, you know? A few weeks after my birthday, my parents called me down to the kitchen. They both looked serious, so I figured it was going to be one of those "what are you doing with your life" talks. I was dreading it because I didn't have any answers. But when I sat down, my dad started talking, and what he said completely threw me. "Daniil, you're 18 now," he said, looking at me with this stern expression. "It's time for you to be independent. Your mother and I have been talking, and we think it's best if you move out and start living on your own." I just stared at him, not really understanding what he was saying. "Move out?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "But, where am I supposed to go?" My mom jumped in, her voice a little softer than my dad's. "We're not kicking you out onto the streets," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "But it's time for you to learn how to take care of yourself. You've got a month to find a job and a place to stay. We believe this will help you grow." I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. I hadn't even started thinking about what I was going to do after graduation, and now they were telling me I had to leave? I didn't have a job, I didn't have any money saved up, and I had no idea where I was going to go. But I could see they weren't asking me, they were telling me. I didn't cry, though. I just nodded, trying to process everything. "Okay," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "I'll start looking for a job." They didn't say anything else, and I went back to my room, feeling completely numb. I sat on my bed for what felt like hours, just staring at the wall. I couldn't believe this was happening. My parents had never even hinted that they were planning to kick me out as soon as I turned 18. Sure, I knew things were tight financially, but I didn't think it was this bad. The next day, I started looking for a job. I walked around town, filling out applications at every place that had a help wanted sign in the window. I didn't care what kind of job it was, I just needed something, anything, to start making money. After about a week of this, I finally got hired at a fast food place. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Once I had the job, I started looking for an apartment. I didn't have a lot of options, considering how little I was making. Eventually, I found a tiny, run-down place on the edge of town. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was all I could afford. The landlord didn't ask too many questions, and I signed the lease. When I told my parents I'd found a place, they just nodded. My mom gave me a small smile, but my dad just said, "Good. It's time you started taking responsibility for yourself." I didn't say anything. I just packed up my things and moved into my new apartment. It was small and depressing, just a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom. The walls were thin, and I could hear my neighbors arguing through them at all hours of the night. I didn't have much furniture, just a mattress on the floor, a small table, and a chair. But it was mine, and I had to make it work. The first few months were tough. I was working long hours at the fast food place, barely making enough to cover rent and food. I didn't have much time or energy for anything else. I was lonely, too. I didn't have many friends, and the ones I did have were still living at home or off at college, so I didn't see them much. One night, about 6 months after I moved out, my phone rang. It was my mom, which was weird because she hardly ever called me. When I answered, I could tell right away that something was wrong. "Daniil," she said, her voice shaky. "Can you come over? We need to talk." My heart started racing. "What's wrong, Mom? Is everything okay?" "Just, please come over," she said, sounding like she was about to cry. "We need to talk." I hung up the phone and grabbed my jacket, heading out the door. The whole drive over, I was trying to figure out what could have happened. I hadn't heard much from my parents since I moved out, just the occasional text or call to check in. But now my mom sounded like the world was ending. When I got to the house, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table, and she looked like she'd been crying. My dad wasn't around, which was strange because he was usually home by this time. Mom, what's going on? I asked, sitting down across from her. She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes. Daniil, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. The reason we asked you to move out, it wasn't just about you being independent, she said, her voice trembling. We needed the money to pay for your sister's college tuition. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? I whispered, not believing what I was hearing. You kicked me out so you could pay for her college? She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. We didn't have enough money to cover everything, and your father insisted that your sister's education was the priority. We thought you'd be able to manage on your own, but we were wrong. I'm so sorry, Daniil. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, trying to process what she was telling me. I knew my sister was the favorite everyone did. She was the golden child, the one with the straight A's and the big dreams. But I never thought they'd go this far. So, you just decided I was less important? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. No, it wasn't like that, my mom said quickly. We thought you'd be okay. We thought it would be good for you to learn how to be independent. Good for me? I repeated, my voice rising. Do you have any idea what it's been like for me? I've been struggling just to get by, and you were doing it all for her? My mom was crying openly now. I know, Daniil, I know. I'm so sorry. But there's more. Your dad, he found out about the money troubles, and he's furious. He said if you don't come back home, he's going to leave us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He's going to leave because of me? I asked, feeling like the world was spinning out of control. He's mad because I hid the bills from him, she admitted. I was trying to keep everything together, but he found out, and now he's blaming me. He said if you don't come back, he's done. I sat there, completely stunned. My parents had kicked me out to pay for my sister's college, and now my dad was threatening to leave if I didn't come back. I didn't know what to do, what to say. I need to think, I finally managed to say, standing up from the table. I'll let you know what I decide. I left the house without another word, my mind racing. I drove back to my apartment in a daze, trying to make sense of everything. When I got home, I just sat in that same chair, staring out the window, wondering how my life had turned into this mess. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus at work, and I couldn't sleep at night. I kept replaying my mom's words in my head, over and over. They had kicked me out to pay for my sister's college. My dad was threatening to leave because of me. It didn't seem real. Finally, I decided I needed to talk to my dad. I couldn't make a decision until I heard his side of the story. So, I called him and asked if we could meet. We met at a coffee shop, and as soon as I saw him, I could tell he was struggling. He looked tired, older than I remembered, like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Dad, I started, once we'd both sat down. Mom told me everything. About the money, about why you kicked me out, and about you threatening to leave. I need to understand, why. He sighed and rubbed his face with his hands before looking at me. Daniil, I never wanted things to get this bad. It's not just about you or your sister. It's about trying to keep our family together when everything feels like it's falling apart. I could see the strain in his eyes. So you think kicking me out was the best solution? No, he said, shaking his head. It wasn't the best solution. It was a desperate measure. We thought if we got you out of the house, we'd be able to focus on your sister's future and manage our finances better. I didn't realize how much it would hurt you. Why didn't you just talk to me? I asked, my voice breaking. I could have helped. I could have figured something out. I didn't want to burden you, he said, looking down at his coffee. You were just starting out, and I thought you'd be better off learning to stand on your own. I didn't want to drag you into our problems. So you thought it was okay to just push me out? I pressed. To make me fend for myself without any warning? He looked pained. No, I see now that it was wrong. I should have handled it differently. But now, it's too late. Your mother and we're on the edge of falling apart. She's been trying so hard to keep things together, and I know she's been struggling. I felt a mixture of anger and pity. And now you want me to come back because you're threatening to leave her? He nodded slowly. Yes. I don't want to, but I can't ignore the mess we're in. We need you to come back and help fix things, at least for a while. Your mom is desperate, and so am I. I sat there in silence, trying to absorb everything he'd said. I was torn between the part of me that was angry and hurt and the part that still cared about my family. After a long pause, I finally said, I need to think about this some more. I can't just make a decision like this on the spot. Take your time, my dad said quietly. I understand. I left the coffee shop feeling even more conflicted. I had been so angry at my parents for what they did, and now they were asking me to come back and help fix their mistakes. I was struggling to figure out what was best for me and what was best for them. Over the next few days, I spent a lot of time thinking. I considered all the options, all the potential outcomes. I thought about my dad's threat to leave and what that would mean for my mom. I thought about my own struggles and whether going back would make things better or just more complicated. Eventually, I decided to give it a try. I agreed to move back in, but on my own terms. I called my mom and told her that if I was going to come back, there had to be some changes. I wanted to be treated like an adult, not just a convenient solution to their problems. She agreed, and a few days later, I moved back into the house. The first few weeks were awkward. My dad was distant, and my mom was overly attentive, trying hard to make up for everything. They seemed to be walking on eggshells around me, and I could tell there was still a lot of tension. We started having family dinners again, which were strained and uncomfortable. I was trying to rebuild my relationship with my parents while also trying to adjust to being back in the house. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, my mom tried to make small talk. So, Daniil, how's work going? Are you enjoying it? It's okay, I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. Busy, but it's manageable. My dad, who had been mostly quiet, suddenly spoke up. You know, I'm sorry about the way things went down. I didn't realize how much this would affect you. I looked at him, seeing the regret in his eyes. I know, Dad. I'm sorry too. I wish things had been handled differently. He nodded. Me too. We're just trying to get through this as best as we can. As time went on, things slowly started to improve. My dad began to open up more, and we started having more honest conversations. We talked about the financial struggles, about my sister's college, and about how we were all trying to cope with the situation. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. One day, my mom came to me with a serious look on her face. Daniil, there's something I need to tell you. We're still struggling financially, but we're getting some help from a financial advisor. They're working with us to create a plan to get us back on track. I was relieved to hear that they were taking steps to address their financial problems. That's good to hear, I said. It's important to get things sorted out. Yes, she agreed. And we're also looking into ways to cut back on expenses. We're trying to be more careful with our money. I nodded. I appreciate that. I know things have been tough, but I'm glad you're trying to make things better. As the months went by, our relationship began to heal. We had more open conversations, and there was less tension in the house. I started to feel more like a part of the family again, and while things weren't perfect, they were better than they had been. Then, out of the blue, my dad left. It was just after dinner one night. I was in my room, working on some paperwork, when I heard a commotion downstairs. I went down to find my dad packing a suitcase. Dad, what's going on? I asked, my heart sinking. I can't do this anymore, he said, looking tired and defeated. I've tried to make things work, but I can't get past everything that's happened. I need to take some time away. What do you mean, take some time away? I asked, feeling panic rising in my chest. Are you leaving? He nodded. I'm sorry, Daniil. I just need to go. I need to figure things out for myself. My mom was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Please, don't go, she begged. We can work through this. We need you. I've tried, my dad said, his voice breaking. I've tried to forgive, but I just can't. I need space. He finished packing and left that night. My mom was devastated, and I felt like everything was falling apart again. I tried to comfort her, but I was struggling myself. I felt like I had lost my dad all over again, and it was too much to handle. A few days later, I made the decision to move out once more. I couldn't stay in the house, surrounded by all the pain and memories. I needed a fresh start. I packed up my things and found a new place to live, a small apartment in a different part of town. It wasn't easy leaving, but I felt like I had to do it for my own sanity. I needed to focus on myself and move forward, even if it meant leaving behind the family I had tried so hard to reconnect with. It's been a few years since all of this happened. I've been working on rebuilding my life, finding stability, and healing from everything that went down. I've cut off contact with my parents, not out of anger, but because I need to take care of myself first. I've realized that I can't keep trying to fix things for others if it means neglecting my own well-being. Looking back, it's hard to believe everything that happened. I've learned a lot from this experience, and while it was painful, I'm trying to use those lessons to build a better future for myself. So, that's my story. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's far from perfect. But it's mine, and I'm learning to own it. Thanks for reading if you made it this far. It feels good to finally share it and get it out in the open.